them at the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and I need real friends. Or a therapist. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie actually does well. This week, we are talking the 2020 film Bloodshot. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my cybernetically enhanced co-host, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. I have a bit of a history with this film, as such as you can for a movie that's 2 years old. But yeah, excited to talk about it.
Well, I saw this movie for the first time preparing for this podcast. I, for some reason, owned the movie. I bought it months ago in 4K, which I'm glad. It's definitely worth watching in 4K. But Andrew, tell us about your history with this movie. It seems a little bit more lengthy than my 2-day history with it.
I saw this. This was the last movie I saw before movie theaters essentially shut down for COVID. It was legit like, it was like the night before even maybe. It was like early March. I forget when this exactly came out. What was the exact date? It was March 13th. So I think we literally went on a Monday night. My friend just texted me and was like, "Want to go catch Bloodshot tonight?" And I was like, "Are the theaters even like open?"
That's like lockdown a week, I think.
Like, I think it is. And so, like, I legit was like, all right. So we went and we watched it. And thankfully, we were able to social distance without even intending to. not a crowded theater, to put it as nicely as I can. But yeah, so this was the last movie I saw in theaters for a long time. I mean, at bare minimum, several months. I think I did brave it for Tenet at some point, but that was still a good almost 6 months without going to the movie theater, which was a weird feeling. And it was definitely an odd situation to leave it on Bloodshot, of all things. So yeah, was interested in going back and checking it out. I didn't have any hard feelings the first time. It was kind of like, all right, and just moved on. If only I'd know what I was going to miss out on. It's so, you're like, hey, yeah, we'll be gone, we'll close for a week. This is no big deal.
Oh,
anyway.
Boy. Yeah, it's crazy to go back to those early thoughts we had during lockdown, and here we are. Yep. Years later. That's a depressing place to go. How about this, Andrew? The last movie I saw before theaters closed was The Invisible Man. And hashtag PP, but I think I win that one.
You 100% win that. Because that movie rules.
It's so good. I know a lot of people, Sonic the Hedgehog was their last movie, which is also very funny to think about. The last movie I saw in theaters was Sonic the Hedgehog. I actually haven't seen Sonic. I guess I can't make jokes about it. Andrew, have you seen Sonic the Hedgehog?
I did. I saw that in theaters.
The second movie, the James Marsden partners up with a CG ally series.
And the first one is?
Hop. How could you forget about Hop? A little bunny. That's the sidekick in that one.
I have no idea how I could forget about Hop. Hop is such a classic. But
wait.
I saw that.
Listeners are writing in. They are furious, Andrew, at your disrespect to Hop.
They are hopping mad. Yeah, no, I did see Sonic. I did see Sonic. I saw Invisible Man. Because yeah, I was going to the theaters like every week at that point, and then just boom, nothing. It was definitely a time. But yeah, so anyway, we're here to talk about Bloodshot.
Bloodshot, which was released March 13th of 2020, made on a budget of $45 million, a little bit modest for a superhero budget in the year 2020. At the box office, it only brings in $37 million, but there is, of course, a very large asterisk next to that because theaters closed as soon as this movie came out.
Yeah, like it came out and like the next weekend, theaters closed. And I think when this movie came out, the general idea that like you need to stop going out and doing things had already started to take hold. So it was definitely a movie that was kind of DOA. I think it went VOD like 2 weeks later. Like it was something like that. But yeah, this was not a movie that was going to have a really good chance at like any point with the way things were going at the time. So
Yeah, the very same month it was available digitally, but those aren't really numbers that we can see and factor in. So I'm not really sure at the end of the day how financially viable this movie was. However, one thing that the pandemic cannot be blamed for is the critical reception. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie just has a 30% approval rating by critics, which, Andrew, it ain't great, which is why we're covering it on this show. But you know what we're going to do on our podcast is only talk about the positives and things we like, and here's a hot preview. I like a lot of stuff in this movie, Andrew. I'm excited to talk about it.
dope.
The movie was written by Jeff Wadlow, as well as Eric Heiserer. Previously, Jeff Wadlow is the writer and director for a lot of movies, including Cry Wolf, that slasher from the early 2000s, and Kick-Ass 2. So, Andrew, there's a good chance we're going to be talking about this man again on a future episode.
Very possible. Had done mostly smaller films. I remember him getting Kick-Ass 2 was kind of a big thing because Matthew Vaughn had been so involved in the first one. So to see the second one handed off to another writer-director was something that definitely attracted attention. Also, obviously, more recently had done, like I said, co-wrote this, but also had written and directed the recent Fantasy Island reboot, the horror kind of take on that concept for anybody that ventured out and checked that out. So still out there doing stuff.
Yeah, a lot of TV credits. Wrote 6 episodes of Bates Motel, which is a show that is so much better than it sounds like whenever it gets pitched to you.
Yes.
A prequel to one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It's very good. That Freddie Highmore, he's a talented fellow.
He is. I definitely agree about Bates Motel. Bates Motel was definitely something where I was like, but then like I finally like watched it and I was just like, oh wow. Like you said, this is something that works far better than you would expect it to.
Our other writer, Eric Heiserer, known for such movies as A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, of course, Final Destination 5, and The Thing, that weird prequel that has the same title as the original movie. And on top of those, he also wrote Arrival, which is wild. I would not have expected #PP, but looking at these movies, I wouldn't expect there was the same guy behind those 3 movies and Arrival, which is
like
one of the best sci-fi movies of recent years.
You look at his entire filmography, and Arrival is just this thing that like sticks out because even his other stuff, it's Nightmare on Elm Street, Final Destination 5, The Thing prequel, Hours, Lights Out, which is another horror movie that I will say I think is a little underrated. Even Bird Box, like all this stuff that he's written, it's these kind of low budget horror thriller type things, and then just bam, Arrival right in the middle of that. Academy Award nominated script,
Yes.
all of that. So
And it's super like heady, lots of twists and turns. I mean, very complicated in a good way. Interesting. Good for you, Eric. Quite a career. The movie is directed by David S.F. Wilson. This is his directorial debut. Andrew, this man doesn't even have his own Wikipedia page. I did a little bit of digging into his career and had directed before, technically. He directed, for example, an episode of Love, Death, and Robots. It's one of those shows that I hear, Chris, you have to watch this. And I haven't yet, but I hear it's very good.
yes.
But most of his career is spent actually in video games, doing VFX and cinematics for video games. A lot of Star Wars games, including Knights of the Old Republic, which is a fan favorite, BioShock Infinite, there's some Halo in there. And then he just jumps over and directs this movie. It's a hell of a career path.
Yeah, it's definitely a it's yeah, like I said, he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, which maybe we'll fix that. That's a little sad, but even still, just again, work in video games that went all the way up to 2016, and then started branching out into films. And yeah, it's the dream. Good for you, man.
Originally, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch were hired to direct. Notable pair for directing the John Wick films. So you got to imagine the movie would have been a little bit different with their kinetic energy. But for whatever reason, they took themselves out of the project, and David S.F. Wilson got the nod. So I'm sure he certainly appreciates their departure.
Sure. I mean, sometimes somebody else leaving is your opportunity, and can't be mad about that. I mean, obviously, Chad and David have both moved on to a variety of other projects, so it's not like they're hurting for anything.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, Andrew, are you ready to talk about this film? Are you ready to talk Bloodshot?
Yes, I am ready to talk about Ray Garrison, better known as Bloodshot.
Veteran soldier Ray Garrison returned from his latest high-stakes mission to spend time with his beautiful wife. But the mission seemingly catches up with him when both he and his wife are captured, and Ray is interrogated for information. Ray's wife is killed in front of him, and Ray is shot and left for dead. Ray then awakens in a high-tech research facility where it is explained to him that after his body was donated by the Army, he was rebuilt with nanotechnology that allows him to rapidly heal. Ray has no memory of his past until he hears a song that played during his wife's murder. After recalling the events, Ray escapes the facility and tracks down his wife's killer and gets his revenge. After returning to the lab, it is revealed that Ray's memories of his wife's murder are actually a simulation, one that he has experienced multiple times with different terrorists as the killer. On Ray's next mission, he is captured by his target, and another scientist reveals the truth to Ray. Now Ray has a new mission to break the cycle and get revenge on the man that put him in it.
Phew.
This is secretly like a sci-fi movie. I mean, the writer of Arrival, you can kind of start to see it in some of the twists and turns that this movie takes.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is definitely we're working with some advanced technology here. There's definitely a sci-fi tinge to this whole story. Yeah.
We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about those twists and turns. But first, let's talk about the cast. Andrew, specifically, I want to know who you think is the best casting and best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty. They raise the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for Bloodshot?
Guy Pearce is Dr. Emil Harding. I can't give it to anyone else. I got to give it to my boy Guy Pearce.
I love that pick so much. I love Guy Pearce dearly. I'm saying this unironically. I think he's one of the most underrated actors out there. He should be. I feel very similar to him that we talked about previously with Aaron Eckhart. Like, how did this man not blow up after his earlier roles that were critically praised and the hits he was in? And then he kind of just becomes like a character actor that pops up every now and then. But yeah, sorry, he's your Mark Strong Award winner. Go ahead, take it away, Andrew.
But anyway, yeah, he plays the scientist that runs RST, which is essentially the company that's responsible for bringing Ray back with his newfound abilities, which are the result of advanced technology. And he's the guy that ultimately we find out is not as noble as he seems. He's not just sending Ray on missions to take out people. He's sending Ray specifically to wipe out defectors from RST. So you've said it in the past, I love my villains. And he ultimately essentially turns out to be our villain here. And he's just Guy Pearce. This guy is awesome. I mean, from Memento to even his turn in Iron Man 3, all that stuff. I love anything this guy is in. He is always great. And here he gets to kind of chew the scenery around some of his cast, where he gets to kind of do that megalomaniacal justification of how he's doing things, trying to explain to everybody that just, he makes it sound so matter of fact that he's like, well, I have to take out and kill these guys because otherwise they're going to spread my technology around and I have to be the only one that knows how to do it. For him, it's this very simple, like base instinct almost of like, well, I can't let them have my stuff. And so he has no problem doing what he's doing, even as some of the people around him start to kind of question his intentions here. But yeah, I loved everything about this performance. He was a great foil for everything else that was happening. And he's just a charismatic actor that, in the first chunk where you're not sure that he's the bad guy, he's a great conduit through the story to unfold. And then as the story turns and he turns out to be the villain, I mean, he's, certainly up to the task. I mean, like I said, even watching like Iron Man 3, how good he is in that and stuff and other performances there. He's fantastic. I will never get tired of watching Guy Pearce.
he's so good at being so calm, right? He's
Yes.
always even keeled. So like even when you think he's the good guy, he's just calming, nice presence. And then there's a turn and he's the bad guy and he's still super calm, doesn't get worked up, doesn't scream, and it's menacing in such a dark way. And Guy Pearce has one of the most specific typecast I've ever seen in Hollywood. They love casting him as the guy who develops groundbreaking technology, then turns out to be a manipulative bad guy. He did it in Iron Man 3. He did it in Prometheus. He's doing it here in Bloodshot. He's so good at such a specific role.
Well, and I think that role definitely lends itself to that kind of duality. That idea that, like, you're not necessarily, like, in Iron Man 3, you're just waiting for the moment where it happens. But just that idea that, like, you're not sure where he lands. And like you said, that calm nature kind of definitely adds to it, where you just sometimes, even when he's the good guy, you still don't really know where this guy sits. Ravenous is a really good example. I don't know if you've seen that one, but
I haven't.
It's a great, dirty movie. Old
Andrew, what are you
heroes.
recommending to me? Do I need to watch this late at night? Do I know what kind of dirty movie am I watching?
Let me put it this way. Ravenous on Wikipedia is described as a 1999 horror western cannibal film. So
I'm in. Sign me up.
Yeah, just it's literally during the Mexican-American War. He plays this guy that is at this kind of stranded military outpost. So I mean, this is like the 1840s. So it's a period piece, and it's just these guys are in this situation. It plays with the morality of what they're forced to do and all these different pieces of it. But Guy Pearce is at the center of that. He's awesome. I think it's just before Memento. It's like the year before. And then obviously LA Confidential in 97. He does shades of this as well. So I would say that Guy Pearce has been awesome for 25 years. And he deserves everything. Cast him in everything.
Absolutely. Memento, I often cite as my favorite movie of all time. I even liked him in The Time Machine, the H.G. Wells adaptation, which maybe isn't great, but he's great in it. I've watched that movie a ton of times. Again, I love it anytime he pops up. I love his little role in Hurt Locker. He's got like the Drew Barrymore and Scream role where it's like, it's about him. No, he's dead in the first 5 minutes. Spoilers for the Hurt Locker, but he's very good in that. Very good, Andrew. I'm glad you picked Guy Pearce. There was a time during this movie where I thought he was going to get my Mark Strong Award. He's introduced. I had no idea he was in this movie. I didn't look up the cast. I did not know. So it was a pleasant surprise to see Guy Pearce on my screen. And I'm like, how can he not get my Mark Strong Award? But someone else came into this movie later on and really killed me in every scene that they're in and added some much needed levity and humor to this film. Of course, I'm talking about Lamorne Morris as Wilfred Wiggins. I absolutely love this guy. He is a scientist, a coder, I should say, who helped write the program that made all of these things possible. They actually stole some of his coding to create the program, so he kind of got, you could say, screwed over by Guy Pearce, his character and his project. But he comes into the movie a little bit late, but then he's kind of a mainstay there throughout. Whenever Ray goes on the second mission that we see him in, that target is prepared. Like, they know he's coming. So they've actually captured Wiggins to help them take out Ray. And they do that with an EMP, and we'll get into the whole plot of it later, but that's how Wiggins enters the story and ends up being a good guy, helping Ray get freed from the cycle that he's in and sort of forming like a new team with another defector, KT. But he is, on the surface, a character that we've seen a ton before. He's the coder, so he's a little bit nerdy, maybe a little bit socially awkward.
Yeah.
Also very funny, lots of quips. But the thing is, Andrew, the quips and jokes are actually very funny. Normally a character like this is a little bit more grating and their jokes aren't funny. In fact, on Guy Pearce's team, there's sort of someone that you could say is analogous to Wiggins on that team, who is a coder who makes a bunch of jokes, and his jokes don't land, and he is a little bit grating. But Wiggins is like the good version of that character. And I know that sounds like I'm kind of throwing a backwards compliment at the movie, but I think that's actually very intentional, that this coder is annoying, but this one is very likable and funny. but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just talk about Wiggins. He's hilarious. He has some of my favorite dialogue of the movie. There's a term that I've never heard before. He gets frustrated at one point and says, "Son of a virgin." And that has entered my vernacular, and I'm going to start using that. I swear to God. Next time I stub my toe, I can't wait, because that's what I'm saying.
Beautiful.
And he has my line that I used in the intro. I need real friends.
Which was a great line. That
Or a
genuinely,
therapist. So good.
I genuinely, chortled when that happened. Like, I was like, that is a genuine, I need real friends. Because he's like, the whole gimmick there is he's in this room by himself, and he's succeeding, and he's, like, excited, but he's by himself. There's nobody around, so there's nobody to like pat him on the back or anything. But yeah, it's a fantastic choice. And I'd forgotten. I knew Guy Pearce. I'd actually forgotten about his character completely, and so I can't at all fault the pick for Mark Strong here, because he's not just, he's a fundamental character to the second half of the film. He is, a huge part of Ray getting his revenge on the person actually responsible for what's going on. And was seemingly going to be part of the potential future of the franchise. So, great pick.
Thank you. Lamorne Morris, I wasn't sure if I knew him. He is actually in Game Night a few years before this.
Yes, he is.
Which is one of the funniest comedies of the past 20 years. Super underrated. I feel like it made some money, but I feel like it went under the radar for a lot of people. I think you actually recommended this movie to me and sent it over so I could watch it. It's hilarious. Highly recommend Game Night if you haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah, I love Game Night. Great choice. Obviously, he was on New Girl for like 7 seasons. A lot of people probably know him from there. But Game Night was... I'm still mad that more people haven't seen Game Night. It was one of those comedies where I was like... It's like literally like the mid... It's that kind of movie that you miss. It's that mid-budget, like $30 to $40 million comedy with a great cast, with great chemistry, that's genuinely clever, kind of actually keeps you on your toes. It was like everything I'd wanted from a movie, especially a comedy. It's the kind of exact movie I want to exist. And then it did well enough, but it still feels like I mentioned the movie Game Night to people and they're just kind of like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "How dare you come into my house and say this to me?"
And then y'all aren't friends anymore.
Right, which is why I'm now alone on all my game nights. So
well, let's talk about the rest of this cast. Let's go and talk about the lead of this movie, Andrew. The role of Ray Garrison is played by an actor that you know by the name of Vin Diesel. What a career this man has. But let's talk about him in this movie specifically. Andrew, what do you think about what Vin is doing here?
I mean, it's Vin Diesel. So at the bare minimum, you kind of, I think, already got a general idea of the trajectory he will be taking this role in.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that as like a detriment, but I think he's given some interesting stuff here. He's put into, obviously, because for so many years now, Vin Diesel has just been the Fast and Furious guy. It's actually kind of rare for him to jump out and do something else, because prior to this, his things where he was like, "Oh, I'm going to do something outside Fast and Furious," even if it was something he was passionate about, it didn't always do very well. Even the later Riddick installments, things like that. So it was a bit interesting that, because originally they were saying Jared Leto was considered for the role of Bloodshot here, which I can't see.
Hey, if you can't get Jared Leto, you get Vin Diesel. I say it all the time.
Exactly. That's what you do. That's the exact point there. But yeah, so he gets thrown into a new situation. Obviously, this is completely different. There's a very fantastic sci-fi high-tech world around him, which is not something, Riddick is, kind of a sci-fi apocalyptic thing, but this is against the grain for what he normally does, but I think he adapts to it just fine. I think he's got some good quips. Like there's one point where Guy Pearce is like explaining to him like what he's done, and he like shows him, he's like, we tried doing this nanotechnology and like single organ systems, but at this point we figured it was time to do a human like a human test. And Vin Diesel just looks at him and goes like, "Of course you did. Like, that's exactly what you're gonna do." And that was another one where I genuinely was kind of like, "Oh, that was actually like a really genuinely great response there." And so, yeah, I like what he's doing by and large. I mean, I think it's, like I said, he's going a little bit against the grain. He's put into a big ensemble scenario as well, which I think he does better in than trying to, do something alone. But yeah,
You
overall,
hate Triple X. Just say it, Andrew.
I'm not going to say it out loud, Chris. Don't make me do that.
The things I'm going to do for my country. You remember that line? Before he has sex.
Didn't the sequel he was in have Donnie Yen in it at least?
Did he come back?
But,
Was he in the third? Oh, he did, didn't he? He's in the third one?
because they did a second one without him, and then they did a third one with him. And I'm pretty sure Donnie Yen is in it. So I might have
I have to watch that. So Vin Diesel in this movie is doing exactly what you expect Vin Diesel to do in this movie. And that's not a bad thing. In fact,
no.
I think, here's maybe a hot take, Andrew. I think he is perfectly cast in this movie for reasons I'm going to explain a little bit later. There's a little tease for later in this episode. But he shows up. He's a badass. He's a one-man wrecking crew. He's Vin Diesel. And I think that is exactly who Bloodshot should be in this movie, because some of the themes and meta-narratives in this film, I think, play into that perfectly. A little tease. I'll dive more into it later, but let's talk about the rest of this cast. Eiza Gonzalez plays the character KT, which I'm not realizing until just now, seeing it written out, that it's supposed to be like Katie, like the girl named Katie.
Yes.
But it's just initials, KT.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And
There's
she
literally
is
a line of dialogue in the movie that explains that.
Well, Andrew, I was getting popcorn. I don't know. At home. So
I didn't realize that, and I'm sorry.
She's on the team at the research facility. What is this place called? Spirit Rising?
RST.
Rising Spirit Technologies?
Yes.
Okay. So she's another team member who is cybernetically enhanced. She has some machinery in her chest that allow her to breathe, and she can do cool things like breathe underwater, breathe while there's smoke in the air, which she's kind of getting the short end of the stick there, because this team is made up of, Vin Diesel, who is unstoppable, right? And you've got another character who's got cybernetic legs that allow him to run fast and jump high, another character that controls a bunch of cameras so he can see everything all at once, and then she has the ability to breathe. It just lets her live.
Yeah, it lets her live. She's immune to pathogens. That was the way Guy Pearce described it.
It's a very specific advantage, but an advantage nonetheless. And she's good. Her role is to be sympathetic towards Ray's character because she knows the truth. Right. She knows he's being used as a weapon, and she's starting to feel a little bit bad about it, going out over and over again, bringing him back just to have his memory wiped and reset. And I think she does a good job. I
agree. She plays that sympathetic role pretty well. Yeah, she's the one that, Guy Pearce is the guy who's like, just one more mission, just one more mission, just one more mission. That's kind of his calling card. Like, I'm only going to make him do this one more time. And then there's always another time. It's, like that classic hallmark of just one more. And then she finally has enough and plays a part in kind of finally getting Ray out of this vicious cycle he finds himself in. But yeah, does a great job. Sam Hugan plays Jimmy Dalton, in the character I just mentioned that has cybernetic legs. And additionally, at the end of the film, he gets even more cybernetic enhancements, but mostly it's just those metal legs. He can run fast, he can jump off of walls. It is pretty cool. Unlike Katie, who is sympathetic towards Ray, Sam kind of hates Ray. From the beginning, he's just immediately a jerk to him. Andrew, I think he might be a little bit jealous that Ray gets all the good stuff, and he just has Star Fox legs. Choosing beggars, man, Jesus. All I've got is my lame robot legs. Just get over it, dude. But yeah, he's definitely the antagonistic one. I think jealousy is definitely something that you could throw out there as being a motivator behind it, just because you can tell that this guy's got an axe to grind. With Vin Diesel, he's like waiting for kind of the moment to go after him, and he definitely relishes the moment when he does. But yeah, Sam plays this part perfectly. Does exactly what he needs to do. Rounding out the RST team is Alex Hernandez, who plays Tibbs. And his cybernetic enhancement is he is clearly scarred across his eyes. I don't think he can use his actual eyes anymore, but he has these cameras on his chest. And later in the movie, additional cameras he controls in the form of drones and cameras on his back. Cameras everywhere that are hooked right up to his brain, and you can see it all at once. This is such a cool concept for a character. Yep.
I love we're introduced to him and you immediately get it. You see all these cameras and you see a quick glimpse of what he sees. I'm like, awesome. He's not making eye contact with anybody because he's blind in the traditional sense, but he can still see everything all around him. The coolest part is he's on a motorcycle later and he puts on a helmet that's entirely metal, no visor, because he doesn't need to see with those eyes. It just completely protects his entire head. It is such a cool look. He doesn't get a ton of screen time. Alex really doesn't get to flex his acting muscles too much. It's mostly about the gimmick, about the ability, but it's one of the coolest abilities and most unique concepts I've seen for a character in a superhero movie in a long time.
I agree. I think it's a very cool concept. Like you said, they don't do a whole lot with it, which is kind of a bummer, but at the same time, there's a lot going on here, so I'm not exactly shocked that something had to kind of be given prominence. And he's not got the antagonistic relationship with Vin Diesel that Jimmy has. They do end up coming to blows, obviously, as the film gets closer to its conclusion, but he doesn't. He sits in between KT and Jimmy for most of this movie, where he's not really antagonistic towards Vin Diesel, but he's not necessarily sympathetic either.
He's just following orders.
Yeah, I think that's what it ultimately is. He's more loyal to RST than anything. And when, the guy that is going after the people that, kind of gave you these new powers, I could see how that would influence your decision on who you're going to stand with. So, but yeah, it's a very cool concept.
Now, Andrew, there's just one more casting I want to talk about here. It's not a major role, but it looks like it's going to be in the beginning of this movie. So we're watching this movie. Ray Garrison gets captured. Our big bad villain walks in. There's music playing. He's dancing in the slaughterhouse that he's being captured in. And he starts interrogating Ray. He threatens to kill his wife with the same weapon that Anton Chigurh uses in No Country for Old Men, the air-powered metal spike that they used to kill cattle. I'm sure there's a name for it that I'm forgetting right now, but he threatens to kill her with that, and he is just chewing the hell out of the scenery. My note literally says, villain is dancing his way into Andrew's heart. I knew right then, this is Andrew's Mark Strong Award winner. He loves this kind of villain. It's going to be cat and mouse throughout the entire movie. And then, 15 minutes he gets killed. And we go for a swerve, and it ends up being a very small part. But the role is played by Toby Cabell, who is actually an alum of our show. He played Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four, the Josh Trank version. And he's doing a great job in the short screen time that he has. He's very charismatic, having a lot of fun, and gets to be like a Weasley coward whenever Vin Diesel eventually catches up to him. I really liked it. It left an impression on me. Probably not enough screen time for a Mark Strong Award from you, clearly.
Right. And that was ultimately what happened. But that sequence where he's dancing it's Vin Diesel and his wife get captured, and he's in, like you said, he's in the slaughterhouse. And so he walks in and he puts on a long winter jacket, and he's dancing down. And it's literally Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads. And he's just literally, it's dancing down this way. And I'm just like, man, if you were the genuine, honest, whole villain of this movie, it would have been over. The Guy Pearce wouldn't have stood a chance against you. But like you said, ultimately, we find out that this whole sequence is fake. This whole thing never actually happened.
It's a simulation, man.
Simulation, man. Like we're all in right now. But this scene is so memorable. But yeah, we'll talk about the scene in a minute. But this is genuinely impressionable. It seems so strange because it feels like he's an actor that you would put in a bigger part, but it's not. He's literally in this movie probably literally about 5 to 10, maybe 6-7 minutes of screen time. It's not very much at the end of the day, but it's definitely memorable. And if he were our key villain, it would have been a harder choice. But such as it is, I stuck with Guy Pearce. But this is definitely, anytime some guy starts dancing around to the Talking Heads, you're gonna leave an impression on Andrew here.
All right, well, let's talk about this movie. I'm excited to jump into it, talk about our favorite scenes, and of course, we're going to start with the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders, and what is your favorite scene in Bloodshot?
Taking us back to Martin Axe, I think my favorite scene, pound for pound, is actually the scene where he where Vin Diesel gets his quote unquote revenge on Martin Axe. I think this is a very uniquely shot and staged action sequence. I think you get some cool sequences here, but basically Vin Diesel has been reawoken. The context is he now knows, he remembers enough to know that Martin Axe, played by Toby Kebbell, is the guy that killed his wife and tried to kill him. So now he wants to get his revenge. So he kind of, quote unquote, breaks away from RST, not realizing that this was all the plan. This is all was the intention, but rushes to where he is. I think he's in Budapest. Hacks into the databases, literally like pings all the cars in the entire town, and then finds the 5 that are in a caravan so that he can find where Martin Axe is going, or find out
because
it's very...
in addition to the nanobots healing him, they also connect him to like the supercomputer back at RST, and he can access all these databases. So it's literally he's doing some hard work here, and they eventually track it to this tunnel where he like wrecks this 18-wheeler in front of them and like blocks them off essentially from getting away. And what turns out, it was like a flower truck. So the entire tunnel just gets like coated with this white powder that's routinely going through the air. It's baking flour, not like plant flour.
Baking flour, not plant flowers.
That would be a different scene altogether if there's a bunch of flower petals.
That would be the Suicide Squad. That would be Harley's scene in the Suicide Squad. But anyway, so it's dark. You've got like the red lights coming from everybody's gun, kind of cutting through the kind of haze that's been kicked up here. And this is really our first shot of Bloodshot like doing his thing. This is the first appearance of like how his powers work in reality. And you just get to watch Vin Diesel wreck some dudes for a good solid like 5 to 7 minutes. This is a long scene. And it's just, I think it's really, really cool. And it's genuinely for me when it got me like, I was re-engaged to the concept basically. Like I wasn't like not paying attention, but this is when I was kind of like, oh, this actually has like a unique, cool look to it. We're thinking about it. We're trying to make this different, and it all works for me. And this is also the first sequence because when he finally does get to Martin Axe is one of the first people that's like, they're not telling you the truth. And at this point, it's easy enough to kind of dismiss that as, he's just trying to save his life or whatever. But this is also the first hint that Ray/Vin Diesel gets that maybe things aren't quite on the level he thinks they are. And it's definitely us for the audience, the first real indicator of this as well. Because the bravado he has in that first sequence where he's dancing around and doing all that, none of that's present here. This is a guy that's now like afraid. He's now like concerned. And it's a very stark contrast. So for the people paying attention, it's definitely something that starts to it puts up some flags. And so it's a very important scene in that regard too, I think. So that's what I'm going with. The unveiling of Bloodshot, as it were.
Very, very good pick. It's not what I picked for favorite scene, but it is one of my favorites. And I took a lot of notes during it because I thought this would be my favorite scene. Because Andrew, up till this point, I'm gonna be honest with you, hashtag PP, but I really did not like this movie. And I end up doing like
there's not a lot happening at this point.
Well, I guess I don't want to jump too into it, but the things that they're doing, the themes, the way they're motivating our hero, I was not hot in the movie at all. And then they subvert a lot of expectations later. It really brought me around on the movie. But up until this point, I wasn't enjoying the movie, but I was like, okay, well, look, here's a cool action scene. Even if I don't love how we got here, I don't like this movie very much so far. This scene is undeniably very well done. It's one man taking out a whole crew of armed people, always a good time. The lighting is very noticeable. Yeah. On the whole, this movie looks great. One of my first notes was simply, digital cameras have come a long way. In the early 2000s, anytime something was shot on digital, you could tell right away it looked a little bit cheaper, a little bit glossy. But now it's just so sharp and so crisp. And especially watching this movie in 4K with HDR, all the colors pop and they use them very well. And in this tunnel scene, there's a lot of very broad reds and blues painting the entire tunnel. And it's sort of, we talked about it on The Losers. We talked about it on The Punisher Warzone. It's very comic booky in that way. Just painting an entire wall or entire scene one flat color like you would see in a comic book. And it's great. He's taking guys out. He's regenerating as fast as he's getting shot.
Mhm.
Very Wolverine in that way. He's like a scientific Wolverine because it's nanobots putting him back together. He'll get shot in the face, and these like strings of nanobots come out, and then they come back into his face and reform it. Super cool.
Very cool.
He takes out one dude by pulling the pins on his grenades and then throwing them face down onto the ground. And that dude gets blown up. Like everything explodes underneath his body, and he shoots into the air. And it's actually a setup for the end of the scene to break into the armored car. He does it again. He pulls out a bunch of pins and just presses the guy's body against the car door. And that's how he makes his way into the armored vehicle. They do a lot of cool stuff to show like just how damn strong Ray is. He'll pick up a grown-ass man and throw him like it's nothing. And it's some kind of, visual effect shot because you can't just one arm grab a guy by the foot, but it looks so natural. Like it looks so believable. It looks
natural.
This dude is just strong as hell. So it's a very cool action scene, and he kills his man, right? He gets revenge on the man that killed his wife. And then as he's walking out of the tunnel, all the red lights, which was created by a bunch of road flares, all fade out, and then it's just blue. He lets go of his rage, of his anger. He got some nice visual storytelling there, which I always love. And it's funny that it comes at this point in the movie because I joked to myself. I watched this movie by myself and I made myself laugh because like 5 minutes in, his wife gets killed and then he gets killed and the screen goes black. And I was like, all right, good movie. And that's the end. And then 10 minutes later, he gets his revenge and he kills the guy. I'm like, all right, that was a short movie. That's the end. Because literally at the end of the scene, everything is wrapped up and you don't know where it's going to go. It's very interesting. Right. Yeah, great scene. Undeniably very fun action scene. And it's very good, Andrew. It's a good pick. I picked a different scene. And even though some of my favorite parts about this movie are a lot of the meta-narratives and twists and sci-fi stuff, the action scenes are kind of undeniable, and the one I'm picking is the final action scene, which is a big fight between Ray and the two other dudes on the team in a glass elevator shaft. It is so much fun. It's such a cool setup for a fight. So they're in a big skyscraper, and the elevator shaft is on the outside of the building. So through the glass of the glass elevator shaft, you see the city beneath, and they're on top of the elevator. Just kind of set the stage here. And there's two elevators side by side. They fight on top of both of them. There's a lot of cool, very creative action set pieces here. In particular, I love at one point, one of the villains is pushing Ray's head against the glass as they're very rapidly dropping down. And so because it's glass, the camera's on the outside, we can see his face smushed up against the glass. And every time they cross a support beam, it rips off part of his face. And then the nanobots heal it, and then another support beam rips it off, and the nanobots heal it. Such a cool way, creative way to really showcase his abilities. And this scene is full of little fun beats like that. There's a lot of the budget went here. There's some full CG body doubles that look pretty good. They're fighting mid-air. A lot of slow-mo sequences. Our villain at this point, Legs, the guy with Star Fox legs, also attaches this thing to his spine that gives him 2 additional metal arms up over his shoulders. So he is a little bit Doc Ock in that way. And our eye guy is also here. So it's just a big fun climax to the movie. It's kind of, I think, designed to be the biggest action scene of the movie. And it got me. I had a lot of fun with it.
I agree. I think it's a very good fight because, like you said, you finally get the big kind of final fight between I call them Legs, between Legs and Vin and Ray here. Obviously, their kind of simmering tension kind of finally comes to a conclusion here. Ray gets the upper hand, and then same with Tibbs, I think his name is.
Eyes.
So
Andrew,
Eyes. They really do have a lot of fun. Eyes. Sorry, my mistake. Eyes. What would Ray's name be then?
Bloodshot.
Blood.
See his eyes in this movie? They got Bloodshot.
Bloodshot. But this whole sequence is very cool. Like there's some definitely. This is also where Bloodshot kind of gets the look that's a little reminiscent of the comic book character, because the big hallmark of the comic book character is his skin is basically white and he's got the red circle on his chest. And they kind of avoid that by and large throughout this film. They kind of tease the red circle with the idea that like when his nanites are like engaged, they'll like glow red, and that creates like a red glow in his chest. But when he's really engaging the nanites here, I guess apparently his skin loses pigment. I don't really know exactly what it is.
Yeah,
that's supposed to be
all the
happening, but
nanites rush into his eyes to make him red, and his heart, and they take away from his skin. I don't know.
His skin just goes white. But yeah, you get that brief look of that kind of classic looking Bloodshot, where it's the white skin, the red glow in the chest, and the red eyes, and he's going nuts. And yeah, it looks cool. Cannot pretend that it doesn't.
It's funny because the red glow into the skin is very reminiscent of the extremist technology from Iron Man 3,
right?
Which is also, of course, developed by Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce himself developed that, Andrew.
Yes, Guy Pearce developed extremist twice, apparently. That's seemingly what we're learning here.
Okay, now I want to start jumping into some of the twists and turns this movie takes, and some of the things I really like about it, and some things I didn't like at first. So the beginning of this movie, like it looks very nice. I took my notes on the camera and the lighting and 4K is great. But we've got Vin Diesel. He's a soldier. He's taking out the bad guys. He's saving a hostage. And then he goes, flies back home, and he's on the airbase, and his wife is there on the runway next to her car. They embrace. There's music playing at slow motion. We go into a montage of them just enjoying their time. And we've seen action movies before. We know what's going to happen.
Yep.
His wife's going to get killed. Like it's telegraphing that right from the beginning. And I'm like, it's hard. You can hardly call it fridging the girlfriend because we don't even know this character. Though. We're just getting introduced to her. It's even less than that, Andrew. And I'm getting so upset that how generic and lazy this is. Like, oh my God, our hero is going to be motivated because his wife is going to get killed. He's got to seek revenge. Like, come on, Hollywood. Let's move on.
Yawn.
And that's exactly what happens. We're in a slaughterhouse and there's an interrogation and his wife that we barely know gets killed. And he's like, I'll find you. I'll kill you. And I'm like, good Lord, this is horrible. How am I going to record this podcast? And the movie lets you sit in that. Like he starts to develop, learning about his new power and he goes to seek revenge. We got this. That's why during that big action scene, like I liked it, but I was like, I'm not very engaged because like this is just such lazy writing, or so I thought, Andrew. Once they bring him back in, and Legs, who doesn't like Ray, lays him on the table to recharge his nanobites, and at this point, Ray can't move, he can't get up, he can just listen to him, and Legs takes pleasure in revealing to him, like, we've done this to you a bunch of times. We've wiped your mind, and this is all fake. We're going to do, you're a weapon. He explains everything to the character because he's about to get his mind wiped, and we as an audience are clued in to what's really going on here. And I'm like, hold up. That's awesome. That's actually cool. Like, it's not lazy fridging the girlfriend. It's sort of a play on that being a cliche, like a meta-narrative on that. There's even a point where Guy Pearce talks to the guy that developed the simulation, and he's almost breaking the fourth wall here. I really love it. He says, you've already ripped off every movie cliche there is. Dancing to Psychopath at a slaughterhouse is plenty. Because he wants to add even more stuff to it. And so that scene was like so generic on purpose. They're just setting this up so that Ray is motivated by revenge, because in this universe, nothing stronger than a action hero that's motivated by revenge to get justice for his wife. And it's sort of like meta narrative on Hollywood action movies. It's like poking fun of that idea. And this is why I think Vin Diesel is perfect casting for this movie, because on one hand, he's playing exactly what you expect from Vin Diesel. I think this is literally the synopsis for, or the premise for A Man Apart, which is another Vin Diesel movie. I think his wife gets killed and he seeks revenge, but that's like legit the entire premise there.
Yeah.
So here it's like a commentary on those type of movies. And Vin Diesel is the guy that, personally, I can't tell if he is genuinely like a meathead action star who just likes being a badass, or if he's self-aware and kind of humble and can make fun of himself. I never know. I know like he's real nerdy and like into D&D, and you can go on YouTube and watch him play with Street Sharks, because that was one of his first acting gigs.
Like commercials,
Yeah, playing with street sharks to sell toys. So there's definitely that side to him, but also he seems kind of arrogant and full of himself and very ego driven. I don't know what the truth is. And that's so perfect for this character that is playing the meathead, gotta get justice for my wife character, but it's a commentary on that. So it really like flips it on its head, and I love that concept. I was not expecting it from this movie. I was hating it the first 15 minutes, and then when that's revealed, I was on board for the rest of the movie.
No, I agree. And that's actually, like I said, that's the thing that they basically realize about Ray is that he really, really, really loved his wife. So they know that if they just keep creating scenarios where some guy kills his wife, he's going to keep going and doing it. But the twists don't stop there. And that's what's even more interesting to me. Because not just do they keep making him think his wife dies, you ultimately find out that not just is his wife not dead, she's not even his wife anymore. Like, it keeps coming. Like, he goes and finally finds her, and he's, like, elated. Because he's like, I can get out. We can be a family. We can do all of this. Because as far as he's concerned, he saw her, like, 2 weeks ago. And he thinks she's dead, but she's like, Ray, what do you talk? Like, we talked about this. You shouldn't be coming around. Like, it's all of this, like, she's like, it's a complete change. I just want to point out, this is Tallulah Riley playing his wife. Fantastic actress in her own right. We didn't really mention her during the cast because she's really not in this movie a whole lot. She's basically got 2 scenes, really, for the most part. But Tallulah Riley, definitely worth checking out. She's 36, writer, director, producer, wrote novels, written movies, directed films. Fantastic woman, worth checking out. But he shows up at her door, and it's like like I said, you're expecting that whole, oh, he finally found his wife. It's like it's over. He can break the cycle. He knows she's alive and all of this. But like I said, the knife almost keeps twisting, where now it's just like she's like annoyed that he's there. She's like, why you, like, I told you to stop coming by.
She has kids and her own family.
She has kids and she has a husband. She's gone. And then he finally like asks the question, and he's like, when's the last time you saw me? And she's like, it's been a long time. And he presses, and he's like, when? And she's like, 5 years. And then that's like the even more crushing realization now that not just has RST made him think that his wife is dead when she's not, his wife is still alive. They're broken up, and they've been doing this to him for 5 years at this point. It like you said, it deconstructs it on a variety of levels. And it's a genuinely good twist on that whole concept to not just, like I said, you make it seem like it's just a #PP, a very boring, generic revenge thriller of I'm going to do this. And then you keep adding the layers of, well, you're actually being programmed to do this. And your wife isn't actually dead. And you guys are actually broken up. We've just been manipulating the emotions you have for your wife to do this. And it makes the villains so much more diabolical in the same way, because it's not just like, at that point, it's deliberate emotional manipulation. And it takes it from being this kind of aloof focus on money or the mission, and it makes it personal. Because now you're doing this to me by choice. And that makes the ultimate confrontation between Ray and Dr. Emil Harding that much more satisfying. It's like, because Emil is still convinced that he did the right thing and he's doing the right thing. But in that moment, Vin Diesel is like, I've literally got nothing. So there's nothing to stop me from just destroying you and everything you stand for. So makes it cool. Like I said, it flips on its head multiple times. Like the twists kept coming, and I was like genuinely like, whoa, what? I was like slow down, guys. This is too much coming at me at once. But yeah, I genuinely think that's all very clever.
I loved that twist. It changed everything about the movie. And you're right, the fact that they kept coming, because it's pretty late in the movie where he finally meets his wife, and then it's revealed not only is she alive, she's moved on. I was like, I was literally like you're saying right now, they keep coming. This is just, bring it on. This is awesome. Bring
Guys, let me breathe. Let me breathe, please.
It was good. Let's jump back a little bit to before all this is revealed, where we think we're just kind of going through the paces of, taking things at face value. Vin Diesel's character wakes up And Guy Pearce is there, and he starts explaining to him everything that's happened. Your body was donated. You've been made to be better. And he tells him this story. And first of all, while he's talking to him, I love this reveal. Guy Pearce just subtly adjusts his glasses, and you see real quick that his hand is a robot hand. And that's how it's revealed. It's just so subtle. It's like, oh, this is sci-fi. Oh, this is totally not personally not what I was expecting. If you know the source material or whatever, you might be expecting all this. But I thought that was super cool. And he tells him this story about, because of course, Ray can't remember anything about his past. So he's trying to tell him, like, you don't need a past to have a future. And he tells him a personal story about when he was a kid. He was a young tennis champion until he lost his arm. And now his arm's been replaced by a robot arm. And I wanted him to say, and now I'm the greatest tennis player in the world. He has his robot arm. He doesn't go that far, but, he's telling him a lesson. And in typical Guy Pearce schmoozy fashion, we learned later this is all a complete lie. This is just telling him what he needs to hear to carry out the mission.
It's all a script. That's literally how he describes it. It's a script. From the moment he wakes up, they're running through the motions, and it's genuinely clever. Like it really is. I think that it's just a cool way to twist that and make it be something different, because it would have been so easy to just do it that way. Now the comic, definitely some of these overtures are coming from the comic, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it definitely takes this movie, because Bloodshot, I'm not going to pretend that Bloodshot is some deeply loved, wide-ranging franchise. It's not. Yeah. I'm guessing most of the people that saw the trailers for this movie were just like, oh, it's another Vin Diesel action thriller type thing. The amount of people who were just like, oh, they made a Bloodshot movie was probably a little limited. I'm not trying to backtalk Valiant. Valiant was very popular at a time. And they had a very successful relaunch about 10 years ago, and this was all supposed to launch like a cinematic universe. But Bloodshot ain't the guy that people are like, oh man, like that's not. People aren't. There's no familiarity with Bloodshot. So, sure. But I think for fans watching it, I think that definitely made it more enticing, because you're like, oh, this isn't just guy gets upgraded and gets revenge on his wife. This is guy is emotionally manipulated by evil corporation. It turns it on its head, and I think that makes it a lot more interesting.
We're kind of going through the paces after he wakes up of the normal, generic, cliche superhero origin. He learns that he's really strong. There's a scene where he goes to the gym in the facility and he's lifting dumbbells, larger and larger dumbbells.
Progressively heavier things.
Yes, something we've seen a million times. And again, it's kind of generic on purpose, which is very cool, little meta narrative. But he starts lifting like entire like plates. I mean, sets, beyond like dumbbells, things that you'd normally bench press. And it made me wonder, like, if I was that strong, I would not work out. I'd be like, I'm good. No. I'm skipping the gym. I can lift a freaking human being.
Wolverine works out? No. If I were Superman, I'd let myself go. It's gonna happen.
Thor in Endgame, that's me, baby.
That's it. 100%. I felt so represented.
He at one point, to really test his limits, he goes over to this concrete pillar and starts punching the pillar and cracking the concrete. And my note literally says, I hope that's not a load-bearing pillar.
Yeah, that's a load-bearing column. Vin Diesel, they said you could do anything. That didn't mean you could ignore building codes.
But again, all very generic, and I can say that in a sort of complimentary way, because it's all meta narrative. It's meta, man.
Because the joke is that he's probably done that dozens of times at this point.
Yep.
Like, it's literally, the joke is that he's running through the motions, and for him it's brand new, but for everybody else, and like you can even sense that on some of the characters. Like when KT is talking to him for the first time, like she gets annoyed at like having to wait for Guy Pearce to get to the next part, so she just starts saying things, and she's like, it's better to just rip off the Band-Aid. And it's like that impatience. And so when you find out the twist later, I think if you go back and watch some of those earlier scenes, you can pick up on some of that stuff. There's a little bit of, foreshadowing in there that like, this is a team that doesn't have to have this done to them. And, definitely with legs, you've got the jealousy, you've got the sympathy coming from KT, and like, you've got these different pieces where just having to do this again and again and again is affecting them all in different ways. And yeah, it adds some good layers to all that.
So eventually Bloodshot is captured by his target by using the ultimate movie weapon, Andrew, the ever popular EMP. That, everyone knows what an EMP does. I don't even know how real this thing is. I assume EMPs are real, but it takes out all electrical devices in a however big radius, right? They can just say EMP, you're like, oh yeah, of course it's going to take down Bloodshot. He's got all these, nanobots in him. And I was recently listening to another movie podcast called Stream It. Check it out. Very good stuff. And they were talking about The Matrix, the original Matrix. And in going back and watching that movie years later, they pointed out that it's interesting that whenever the idea of an EMP comes up in that movie, they explain it. Yeah, it's an electromagnetic pulse. It takes out all machines in a radius. And it feels weird now because we all know what that is. But it's just because we've seen it in movies. And I don't know if Matrix is like the first one off the top of my head. I mean, it might be one of the first ones.
What year was The Matrix? 99?
99. Ocean's 11 is the other one that I think of. That's an older. I think
Small
it's 2000,
Soldiers
2001.
is what I think of, which is 98, I think.
Dude, I love Small Soldiers so much.
And I think it's before Matrix, and they use an EMP in the climax of that movie.
Look at that. Small Soldiers might have its place in history. I'm assuming, God, I got to rewatch Small Soldiers because I'm having trouble remembering this. Do they explain an EMP in that movie? They must.
Yes.
They break down for you what it is. Awesome.
They basically, they it's done in like a, I'm not going to say they stopped and got out the whiteboard so that they can, explain electrical theory to you, but they definitely explain it because it's what they use to defeat the Commando Elite. Spoilers for Small Soldiers.
I love Small Soldiers. Unironically, I think it is a great overlooked movie. At the time, it was like, oh, Disney's doing Toy Story. They're doing Toy Story in real life. And that is not at all what that movie is. No, at all.
Absolutely not.
But it's awesome. The soundtrack is phenomenal. I legitimately listen to that soundtrack probably once every 6 months. It is so good. It's a lot of like modern remixes of classic songs. But good pull, Andrew. If you can think of a movie that uses an EMP before Small Soldiers, please let us know. I'm very curious where that comes from. But at any rate, jump forward to 2020. We all know what EMPs are, baby. And that's how they capture Bloodshot. So his target has forced Wiggins to work for him. I think Wiggins uses the term indentured servitude to learn how to capture Bloodshot. And that's how they come up with the EMP. But Bloodshot also takes out his target. But then he gets taken down. So now it's just Wiggins and Bloodshot in the facility. And this is our introduction to Wiggins, my Mark Strong Award winner. And it is fantastic. Again, another very fun flip on all of this. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the part where there's some dialogue that is very significant. I'm wondering, this movie's so meta. I gotta wonder if this is meta. Here's how the dialogue goes. He's asking Bloodshot what he remembers. And he says, I saw my wife in a dream. And they go, good. And he continues, I saw her murdered right in front of me. Andrew, that is lifted almost exactly from Memento, where Guy Pearce is asked by Carrie Ann Moss, what's the last thing you do remember? And he says, my wife. And she says, that's nice. And he continues, dying. I remember my wife dying. Do you think that's... I've got to wonder, since Guy Pearce...
It seems too on the nose to not... It seems too on the nose to be accident. Yeah. I don't know. That's a fun pull there, though.
Yeah, kind of took a lot of me. But at the end of the scene, so you got... he manages to get Bloodshot disconnected from the computers that control him back at Guy Pearce Laboratory. And Wiggins is telling him, like, I do this, they're going to come for you, and they'll come for me, too. And Vin Diesel, the badass, says, I'm looking forward to it. And Wiggins goes, I'm not. I'm just a dude.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. Yeah, Wiggins is definitely an injection into the film because to that point, like there's some kind of like quips and some like smiles, like some side-eyeing and some smiles and stuff, but Wiggins is like your genuine first like levity in the film. Because to that point, things are kind of dire. So he definitely gives the film an injection. And yeah, like you said, every scene, most of his jokes, they all land. It's all pretty well done.
Yeah, later, Wiggins and the coder back on Guy Pearce's team are like fighting for control of Bloodshot.
They're
and
code fighting.
Yes, my note says, "He who types fastest controls the simulation." They're like whacking away, typing away at their keyboard because that's what you do in movies. Which there's not an exciting way to show someone coding or hacking because it's very click, type a line, but you gotta type it fast.
The disrespect you've shown to hackers, my God, man. No, no, definitely like the movie just turned into hackers there, where suddenly it was just no one types that fast.
That's the same scene where he says, "I need real friends" or a therapist, and he gets another laugh out of me because he's successful. He gets Bloodshot in his side. He's able to take over to the sim, and then he grabs like a Nerf basketball and he throws it over to the hoop and completely misses.
Yeah, and not just that, he says Kobe before he throws it and then completely misses.
Perfect.
Kobe. Because remember, kids, Kobe for accuracy, yeet for distance.
This is being a very strange PSA from Best of the Rest. There's a little bit there's like a face-to-face somewhat of Ray and I'm just calling him Guy Pearce. I'm not looking up his name again. Yeah. It's Guy Pearce. It's Guy. So Ray and Guy are meeting in a virtual space, very similar to like the Matrix, and a simulation essentially. They're face-to-face, but not really. You get the idea. But they start kind of throwing out some like themes of the story and the movie, and Guy Pearce is explaining like why they put him through the simulation, and he tells him, "Revenge is what makes a man like you exceptional, Ray," which again is like meta commentary on these action movies. And then Vin Diesel has a nice little line here. He says, "Life is about not knowing what's coming." I just thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah, it's a good little
nugget.
Comeback there.
The end of this movie is very interesting. After he takes out Guy Pearce, which he's literally willing to like sacrifice himself to take out Guy Pearce to get his man, because that's all he has left to live for. Action movie stuff.
Because it's like Guy Pearce said, revenge is what makes a man like you exceptional.
Boom. And they go boom. When he drops a grenade, Guy Pearce is dead. And then he wakes up in the back of a, what do you call that thing? A caravan? A camper? He wakes up on a bed. And Wiggins is there, and I took a note that Wiggins' final form is really cool, because now Wiggins he's been dressed in like kind of shaggy clothes and a beanie, and now he has like gold chains and shades on.
Yeah.
Very cool. But he wakes him up and he explains everything to him, and he's like, do you remember everything? And he does remember everything. He's like, okay, cool, we're free. And KT is there. And Vin Diesel walks out of the camper, and KT is standing by the lakeside. They walk up, and I like that there's no dramatic kiss or anything. They're just teammates. It's very cool. And they all get in the truck, and they drive off on this road that's on the side of a mountain. Literally, the sun is setting, and they say it's perfect. And then Wiggins chimes in. He says, "Yeah, it's a little too perfect, if you ask me. Are you serious? Riding off into the sunset? Are we sure this isn't a sim?" Boom. End credits.
Boom. Ending.
What? Is it a simulation, man? Are they still being held captive somewhere? Is Ray still sleeping right now? We don't know. We don't know. Very, very fun sci-fi ending.
Yes, I thought that was very cool.
Maybe not Blade Runner level, but but it's up there.
It's up there. It's the top 73 for sure. No, it is interesting because, this movie ends in a relatively happy ending as far as like Ray is now free from the cycle. KT is now free from the cycle. They've got Wiggins with them who understands the technology and can help them. Wiggins makes Vin Diesel self-sufficient so that he doesn't need to be recharged by RST or anything like that. So he literally takes the technology and makes it better, which, if you weren't an evil corporation, Guy Pearce, he probably would have helped you do that.
That's the true lesson.
That's the true lesson. But this was supposed to continue, and supposedly will still continue.
As of right now, there's no canceled plans. There's a sequel. There's a connected universe on the horizon.
I think it was the end of 2020. Vin Diesel confirmed that he was involved. I think they kind of accepted that the box office on this was out of their hands. So I think the intention is definitely still to continue. They're going to do some stuff with some other Valiant properties, including Harbinger. And eventually it was supposed to be like a shared cinematic universe, which a few things make me groan as much.
The VCU. Everyone's been chopping at the bit for the Valiant Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, because that's but it was going to be, I think, 2 Bloodshot movies, 2 Harbinger movies, and then a crossover called Harbinger Wars. And so, yeah, we'll see. Like I said, apparently the Bloodshot sequel was back on. They announced it, I think it was late 2020. So I think obviously with film productions getting relatively back to normal, we'll see potentially some updates on that. Maybe Guy Pearce gets to come back as an evil AI, which would be the most awesome thing in the world. But so we'll see.
Well, Andrew, I want to know your thoughts about how this movie functions as an adaptation of the comic. But before we get to that, one quick note here. Something that I've started taking note of since we've been doing this podcast is whenever movies that take place all over the world, they like to have these title cards that show you where we are in the world. I noticed this back on Hellboy, have been on the Losers. And they're typically, they get really inconsistent. Are they showing us the city, the country? And so I took note of every title card that shows up here to see if they're consistent. So let's run through it really quick. The first one we see is Aviano Air Base, Italy. Okay, so we got a specific location in a country, Aviano Air Base. And then after that, we go to the Amalfi Coast, Italy. So again, not a city, but a specific location within a country. Yeah. And then next is Budapest, Hungary. Now we just got the basic city, country. But you know what? I think we're pretty consistent so far. Even those first two weren't cities, it's a specific location within a country. The next one we see is London, England. Simple enough. Pretty good track record so far, Andrew. And then they just throw it all away by giving us a title card that says Soho, London, which is a specific part of a city. So instead of where the country has been the entire time, now it's just a city. And that annoys me more than it should. Hashtag PP.
Consistency in your title cards, folks. It ain't, we're not asking much. Consider this a call to arms.
Here's what I know about Valiant Comics. When I think of Valiant Comics, here's what I think of. I think of if you go on eBay and get a comic book lot of 50 books for $10, 48 of them are from Valiant. If you go to a comic book store and you go to the long box, it says 50 cents per issue. 80% of those are Valiant. Their heyday was in the 90s when there was a comic book boom that saturated the market. You had Marvel, DC at the top. You had Image popping up. A lot of other publishers, and Valiant wasn't near the top, but they were pumping out comic books, and you could say, this isn't even an insult, I mean, their superheroes are like C, D, E list, right? I mean, they're certainly not as popular as the big guys. So I don't know much about these characters. I don't know anything about Bloodshot, and I know you're a comic book expert, a cybernetically enhanced comic book expert, which is the lore for this episode. But I'm imagining you haven't read a ton of Valiant comics personally, but I don't know, maybe you know more than I do. Is this a good adaptation of Bloodshot?
I think you've got noble intentions here. Just this is something I see akin to, like, I don't know. This is going to sound backhanded, but it sounds a lot like the Hellboy movie from 2019, where, like, we're taking a lot of the DNA and we're kind of trying to fix it into this new thing. Valiant is such an interesting company because they are kind of like the Image before Image in a lot of ways. Because Valiant releases its first title in, I think, 91, and it is born out of a failed attempt by a group of people to buy Marvel Comics, including former editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, Jim Shooter. And when
Isn't it funny that for a long time, the idea of buying Marvel Comics was a very real possibility for like a decade?
Extremely real. And it actually got bought by somebody at the time. And because Marvel declared bankruptcy at a certain time, which is another thing that seems ridiculous to fathom today. But after that kind of failed, after that deal didn't appear, these same groups formed a company that essentially an LLC, essentially, that they used Valiant as a subsidiary of. And they recruited numerous writers and artists from Marvel, including like Barry Windsor Smith and Bob Layton. And it was a mix of characters licensed from like Western Publishing, like Magnus Robot Fighter and Solar Man of the Atom and like Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which were old characters from like the 60s, kind of like Buck Rogers type adventurers. And
I didn't know until this very moment, Andrew, that Turok wasn't just an N64 game. That comes from a comic book?
Yeah, Turok actually is a comic book. It debuted in the 50s, and it's been revamped and redone multiple times over the years. And then when Acclaim, who buys Valiant essentially in 94, I believe the video game ends up being based off of their kind of relaunch of the idea. So eventually those licensed characters give way to their characters, which included Bloodshot and Ninjak and a variety of other characters like Exo Manowar and things like that, where they would take these concepts, Bob Layton being a big writer on a lot of these early titles. Bob Layton, notably known for his multiple stints on the character Iron Man.
I've heard of him.
With a variety of others. Yeah, I've met Bob Layton. He's a very nice man.
I mean, I've heard of Iron Man, but yeah, Bob Layton too.
I misunderstood that. But
I thought you'd be like, yeah, I've met Iron Man. I was like, what? How am I just now learning this? I gotta imagine, though, if you are a die-hard Bloodshot fan, a big budget movie released in 2020 has got to be beyond your wildest expectations.
I would assume, yeah, just because it's one of those things too. Like as watching it, even as a comic book fan, I was kind of like, wow, like of all the things to exist in 2020, Valiant got a Bloodshot movie out. Like that's just because you hear about every comic gets optioned for a film these days. Every independent comic is like almost immediately like they've optioned it for a show, they've optioned it for a film, and so many of them just never come to pass. And so when I was in a theater watching Bloodshot, I was like, man, there was a piece of me that was like, I'm not going to believe it till the credits roll that this is actually a Bloodshot movie that was released by a major studio. But it's definitely kind of impressive that the movie exists at all. But I think obviously they're trying to be respectful. Like I said, the ultimate successes and failures, that's a different discussion. But I don't think there's anything here that's trying to like reinvent the wheel of what Bloodshot is. So yeah, that was your crash course in Valiant Comics.
Well, Andrew, we've officially talked about Vin Diesel on this podcast. Everybody makes comic book movies. I think we've established that, right? There's nobody left out there at this point. It's never been a comic book movie. No one? Zero?
Never. Because, Vin Diesel had definitely not been in a comic book movie before.
No, but not the one, not one that we've talked about.
Oh, no, of course not.
I am Groot. Yeah, we just need that superhero movie starring Tom Cruise and Leonardo DiCaprio and Clint Eastwood. That's our last three. And Julia Roberts. Get those in a movie, and you've wrapped up Hollywood.
Pretty much.
Andrew, I've got a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Actually, this question comes from our Discord, from the username Dr. Douglas. This is actually someone that we know IRL. This is mutual friend Doug hopping in to ask a question. So thanks, Doug.
Uh-oh.
I thought this question would be appropriate for this week. As the time of recording this, Batman Mania is sweeping the country. And I assume by the time this episode comes out, we'll still all be thinking about Batman. So Dr. Douglas asks, how would you rank the Batman films of the 80s and 90s, Mask of the Phantasm included? That last bit is a big wrench in the gears here, because we've talked about actually 3 of those movies on this podcast. So we're talking Batman 89, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, and Mask of the Phantasm. We have 5 movies to rank here, Andrew.
Okay.
For me, the bottom of the list is easier than the top of the list. And you can tell me when we might diverge. I think the very bottom is Batman and Robin.
Sure. Which
I enjoy. We have a whole episode about it. There's stuff to like there.
Yeah.
But it's the bottom
100%.
Yeah. Right above that, I'm putting Batman Forever.
Sure.
And now it's tricky. We got 3 left. So we got Batman 89, Batman Returns, and Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I think we've talked about all these movies in some capacity on this show, except Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Right. Obviously, you can't talk about Returns Forever and Robin without inevitably talking about Batman 89. And
What do you think about Mask of the Phantasm? We've you and I have talked about it a little bit before, but really not too much. I really like it. It's a movie
As
that
do
growing
I.
up I didn't know existed. It was released in theaters. It flopped. I didn't see it until way, way, way later. Went back and watched it. I love Batman the Animated Series, which is the universe this movie comes from, and it's very good. Although I'm not really sure if it's my favorite Batman animated movie. There's been a lot of good ones, but it is definitely up there.
sure.
So,
Um,
how about you, Andrew? Is this top 3 easier for you than it is for me? I'm having some trouble right now.
I think the number 3 slot is Batman Returns. I think I put Batman Returns third. The top 2 are the tougher call for me. Like, I like Batman Returns a lot, and when we revisited it for the show, I was like, wow, there is a lot to like here.
Yes.
It definitely
Same.
feels
Whenever we did the episode, it really kicked it into another gear. I hadn't watched it in a while.
right. And
I
part of
really
me
enjoyed
almost
that rewatch.
Yeah, Batman Returns is. I remember growing up, like I just feel like my parents were just like, Batman Returns isn't that good," and I just always watched Batman. But I just rewatching it recently, like, man, well, now I'm talking about it, now I don't know.
I think
you got Michelle Pfeiffer's in there, and she really
great.
turns that up.
Christopher Joaquin is also a good bad guy.
Yep. And then you've also got, you know the guy,
Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito. Yeah.
Is this a fun bit? We mispronounce everybody's name. Is this fun?
I don't know. I feel like we're better than this. But
Look, I'm
No,
going to go ahead and lock in my top 3, and then I'm going to let you suffer and figure out yours, because I think I just got it.
okay.
All right, so bottom, number 5, Batman and Robin, then Batman Forever, and then I'm going to put Batman Mask of the Phantasm right here. As
We're
number
gonna put
3.
it 3. Okay.
It's very good. I love it. I love that universe. I think we've actually got better Batman animated movies since then, which is, maybe that's unfair, but that's why I'm putting it here. But it's great. If you haven't seen it, track it down and watch it. It's awesome. It's very good. It's a good mystery, and it's highly recommended. Then I'm going to go, Andrew, number 2.
Oh, I can sense it. I feel it coming.
Batman 89 at number 2, which I really like. I don't love as much as most people. We've had many conversations about this.
That's
and
true. Yes.
At this point, Andrew, in 2021, or what the hell years in 2022.
2022.
Oh my
You're
God.
Lord.
We've had a few movies that examined this era of Batman that I enjoy more. So that's why I'm putting 89 at number 2. And number 1, I'm going to put
the top spot.
Batman Returns.
Batman Returns. Ooh, man.
A movie that I can put on right now and have a good time. Love it. I'm probably going to watch it like every Christmas now. I have this renewed interest in it.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. It's a great holiday movie. The best score of all these movies we're talking about, I think Returns is an improvement on the 89. It's got the Batman theme, of course, but then you add in that holiday winter element, takes it to another level. Batman Returns getting my top spot. So locking it in. Final answer. Andrew, no pressure, but all the pressure. What do you got?
I fold. I don't know. Yeah, like you said, the bottom being Batman and Robin and Batman Forever is easy. Just because we've re-examined those and we like them a lot. There's things to like, there's things to enjoy, but they just don't compare to the other 3. I feel like, all right, I am going to do Mask of the Phantasm at number 3 as well.
Okay.
Just because my personal investment in Mask of the Phantasm is not as deep as it is for the others. I know people will argue that you're, do an unbiased list. I'm not going to do that. I'm not. It's not how
this is
works.
your list, Andrew. No judgment.
This is my list. So Mask of the Phantasm goes in at number 3. Not because if you told me that Mask of the Phantasm was the best of these 5 movies, I wouldn't think you were crazy. I wouldn't question you whatsoever, because as a genuine narrative story, it's genuinely probably the most consistent of all of them. But part of that is because it was coming from an established universe where they had worked out like all the kinks already. It was that group firing on all cylinders that just made a feature length episode essentially, and it's awesome. It's exactly what you would expect it to be, and it's awesome. I will only diverge in the final two, where I will do Batman Returns at number 2 and Batman 89 at number 1, and that is just because my personal affinity for Batman 89 digs back 34 years at this point.
Yeah.
That movie, that 33, whatever it is, that movie has been with me essentially my entire life, and I have watched it my entire life. So there is always going to be a deep love for Batman 89. But Batman Return, I was really like, because genuinely part of my brain was like, does Mask of the Phantasm go first? But like, I don't have like the emotional investment in Mask of the Phantasm like I do Batman. But Batman Returns, rewatching it, I was like, that movie's too fun to not be in one of the top 2 spots. Batman Returns is a blast. And
yeah.
I know people will tell you that's not true. They're lying. It's so comic booky and so goofy that it's awesome. But yeah, so that's what I'm going with. Batman Robin, Batman Forever, Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Returns, 89.
Lock it in. Very good. I
Locked.
think lists are more fun when you do put in that bias and that personal. Like, I want to hear Andrew's list. Me trying to be like I'm an expert, giving you the the objective list, that's not nearly as fun as putting your personal stuff in there. So I respect it. Andrew, the one time I do remember us talking about Batman Mask of the Phantasm, for whatever reason, we were actually comparing it to Batman Return of the Joker, which...
Yes.
I don't know.
Batman Beyond Return of the Joker.
Right. I might personally...
Is that 90s?
It
because
can't
Batman Beyond Return of the Joker is 90s. Then I'm in real trouble.
Well, Doug didn't list it in his question, but yes, that would be another wrench. But I think Batman Beyond starts in 99.
2000.
So
that's 2000.
Okay, I say the movie comes a little bit after that. But
because that, I'll say this: Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. That is a ridiculous concept that 100% should never work, and yet somehow 100% did.
It's better than it has any right to be. Because, like you said, you take the Batman the Animated Series guys and say, hey, make a feature-length movie. Of course it's great. You expect that. But merging Beyond with the original series and resurrecting the Joker, like, none of that should work. And that movie freaking rules. So, I don't know if it's better, but it is punching above its weight class. That's for dang sure.
Definitely. Batman Beyond Return of the Joker was that movie where, like, the very title where you're just like, what? How are you? Like, is it a new Joker? Is it going to be this? But then, like, no, like, it's legit. It's him. It's the Joker. And you're like, how in God's name are you going to pull this off without it being super contrived and super cliched? And I was just like, whoa, that is, and yeah, it's definitely a movie that's playing fast and loose with its technology, but they all do. But it sticks the landing as far as I'm concerned. And I was like, whoa.
I like a lot of Batman animated movies. DC just makes great animated movies for the most part.
Yeah.
Gotham Knight and Under the Red Hood probably round out my favorite Batman animated movies, with special shout outs to Batman Ninja, Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Those, off the top of my head, those are some of the best ones. So check them all out if you haven't already. Most of them, I think, are streaming on
is a
HBO
great
Max.
comic that rules. So hopefully the animated one of that did some justice to it. So I'll have to check that out.
I'm the reverse. I've only seen the movie, so I need to go back and read the comic and see what they did with the content. But I really liked the movie. Check out those animated recommendations. Thanks again for the question, Dr. Douglas. And remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Eric Heiserer. Am I saying this correctly? There's two ERs in there. Heiserer. I hope I got that right. Rounding out the Alex... What the hell?
What even was that supposed to be?
You'll see in a second. Rounding out the RST team is Alex Hernandez. All right. That was my hold music.
Let's go.